Hi there, and welcome to a special episode of the Tilehurst End podcast. I'm Ross Weber, no Ben today, but I'm very excited to be joined by Dan Worth from WhoScored.com. How are you doing, Dan?
Yeah, I'm really good, mate. How are you doing?
Yeah, doing really, really well. It is 8 a.m. in America, so I've just woken up, but this was a call I couldn't miss, so I'm excited.
That's good. I've had a few more coffees on you, though, I imagine, so I might be a little more excited.
Exactly. I'm just breaking into my first one now, listeners. So we'll as the pod goes on, I'll perk up a little bit. So I'll just get started. Thanks so much for to ZCZ Films, our sponsors, for all their help through the season. They've been amazing. And I think that hey, if you like special episodes, I think we're going to have one with them at some point in the summer as well. So look out for that. And yeah, we'll go into a short little break here, and then we'll be right back.
Keep up to date with all things Reading FC. Follow the Tilehurst End on Facebook and Twitter.
This podcast is proudly sponsored by ZCZ Films. Remember, if you want to get involved in sponsoring the show, drop us an email to thetilehurstend@gmail.com.
All right. Well, so guys, if you are on Reading Twitter or X or whatever it is these days, and obviously that's a lot of us. If you are a Tilehurst End listener, you may have seen Dan before in the community. Obviously, he is a large part of WhoScored.com's social output, but he's also a big Reading fan. And I think kind of a big Lewis Wing fan as well. That's kind of what caught my eye when we started chatting, Dan. But do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do for WhoScored?
Yeah, of course. So I'm social and content manager for WhoScored and odds checker, but a lot of my work, or a lot of my football work, is on WhoScored, which basically just means I manage the social accounts for those guys and create the content, which is largely Edge of the Box, which is our main podcast and video show, which goes out across all our social accounts and YouTube and Spotify, etc. And largely just use the WhoScored data, of which there is loads and loads for anyone who has been on the site, and put it in nice bite size on Twitter. And yeah, we obviously have quite a big following, which has built up over a long period of time. So we get really strong engagement. So this is so much fun to work on and tap into different audiences, because we have so many leagues. It's not just like the Premier League guys, which is why I have so much fun with the Lewis Wing stuff that you mentioned and Reading in general, because we go through all of the top 4 in England. We do all of Europe's top 5, in fact, all of Europe's top 7 and more. There's too many leagues to actually, for me to remember them all and bring up, but that makes it super fun because, as I said, we can speak to teams from all over the world and have something for kind of all of them. So yeah, it's a great job and I love doing it.
Nice. Yeah, listeners, if you weren't aware, you have stumbled into a sort of quasi tactics / stats pod here. So just be ready for that. Yeah, I think what you said there about it going down through the leagues, WhoScored is really relevant, because certainly it's been one of the sites that I've used as the season's gone on to sort of put together a view of Reading. It's kind of difficult with the lower leagues sometimes to find those kind of advanced stats. So any place where you can get them is super, super useful. One of the most useful things on the WhoScored site, or one of the things that I think has certainly been notable on the WhoScored site, is the team, like, or the rating for the players. Can you talk to us a little bit about how that sort of rating comes together?
Yeah, for sure. Like, it's quite complex, so I'll try and avoid any like jargon or anything like that. But basically, the ratings are a statistical algorithm that we built way before I joined WhoScored, and they take in like 200 raw statistics, like for players and for teams, weighted according to their influence on the game, where they happen in the pitch, and then like what comes after. So, for example, one of the stats that we use quite frequently is error. So we have error leading to a goal and error leading to a shot. So obviously, error leading to a goal is weighted down way more than error leading to a shot. So that just proves like what happens after the thing has an impact on the ratings. Every player starts at 6. So that kind of gives you an idea as to what is a good and bad or average rating. So 6 is average, Anything below that is pretty poor. Anything above that is really good. And obviously, we do occasionally get some 10s. Harvey Nibbs has had one this season.
Right, there you go.
I think he's actually one of only 4 players in the league to have one this season. I should have really prepared that, but that does happen from time to time. We don't tend to get, I mean, I've never ever seen a 0. I don't know if that's possible, but we do have some very low scores. So they're fun to watch out for too. I think the coolest thing with the Who Scored rating though, and is another part of my job, is that we're trusted by quite a lot of leagues and publications to provide their team of the week. So for the EFL, I don't know if you've seen, but we submit that to them and they use it. Obviously, there's no bias at all in that because the ratings are completely, they're objective and they're done by the algorithm. So we have to take it, although Lewis Wing has been in a few times over the last couple of weeks, purely down to his performance, nothing to do with me. But yeah, that's also something that I get to do right for the EFL about how these players have made the team and tap into their performances from the weekend and stuff.
Nice. Actually, this is Dan. This is going off piece, so I apologize. But speaking of team of the week, because you're right, Lewis Wing has appeared there a lot recently. Is there any other League One player you can think of who showed up there a lot?
Carl Piergiani seems to have been in it almost every week all season. I'm pretty sure he's nailed on for League One Player of the Season.
Nice. Okay. Where does he play? Sorry?
He's a Stevenage centre back.
Stevenage centre back. Okay.
I'm talking off the top of my head here, so these stats are definitely not correct, but I'm pretty sure he's not lost a header. He's an absolute animal in the air.
Wow.
And that is obviously not the only reason. As I said, there's 200 stats that go into his rating, but he's had a really strong performance for Stevenage this season.
Nice. I'm impressed that you pulled that out. Very good. All right. Well, so let's talk about Reading. Obviously, we're on the Tilehurst end, so we're here to talk about the Royals for the most part. It's been how do you feel about this season, actually, Dan? It's been a pretty reasonable time, especially since November, if you're a Reading fan, considering the past few years.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to describe this season in like a short and snappy way because, well, it kind of feels like the longest season of my life. And I'm sure I'm not the only Reading fan that applies to, just because of everything going on off the field and, you know, first time in League One and things like that. But there have been a few positives, particularly on the field. I guess the less said about off the field stuff, the better for the morale.
That's a good point, actually. Yeah, I just said things were reasonable this season, but I'm going to caveat reasonable on the field since November.
For sure. Yeah. And then that's been shown in the overall ratings of Reading. And even just like looking on the past few seasons, like, you know, even the seasons that we stayed up in the Championship, it's been a little while since it's been overwhelmingly positive. I had a quick look at goals scored because I felt like we'd scored a decent amount this season. It's actually the most since 2016-17. Obviously, this is in League One and not in the Championship, whereas that wasn't the Championship. But 68 goals in that season versus 65 now, with one game still to go. So potentially we could match that if I'm being hopeful against Blackpool at the weekend. But I thought that was quite a nice positive. And we've conceded 68 goals, which, could be better, but is exactly the same as last season, but much better than the 87 conceded in 2021-22 under Ince. So, I think there are a lot of positives to take, and as you say, like particularly since November.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd be interested to see, this is not something I'm putting you on the spot for, don't worry, but I'd be interested to see Reading sort of conceded per game since like Pereira and Bengay and Bindon took over in the middle there, rather than, you know, the sort of patchwork is maybe the wrong word. Obviously, Abbey was a large part of the first half of the season, but just different players playing there. So, are there any notable standouts for Reading this season on who scored, either surprisingly or unsurprisingly, I suppose?
I would say like all of the standout players they're not unsurprising. Like it is Lewis Wing and it is Sam Smith and it is Harvey Nibbs. And I will probably spend a lot of this podcast talking about those three. So the one person that I kind of wanted to speak about is Femi Aziz. Obviously, there was some interest I think from Plymouth maybe in January, or at least one or two championship sides. And it feels to me
Yeah.
like it's kind of gone a little bit quiet. He's not necessarily kicked on. But one stat when I was having a little look that stood out to me was that Aziz ranks joined 5th in the league for big chances created. Now, had I not looked at those stats and someone asked me that question, I probably wouldn't have said he was one of our biggest creators. I don't know if that's just me. But yeah, I don't know if he would have been my first port of call. So I was quite surprised to see that. And yeah, he's quite a nice one to include in this sort of section rather than focusing on the thing that I mentioned before, which I have loads of stats to come on to about how good.
I do like that, though. But what I'll say, though, actually, to be fair, Dan, is I think don't feel bad about going on about Sam Smith, because I mean, I certainly haven't in the last few weeks. But Lewis Wing and Harvey Nibbs, I think it's quite clear Lewis Wing is going to win Player of the Season next week. I'm still in the Tyler Bindon camp, but that's just, that's my psychosis. Don't worry about that. I think Nibbs is closer than some people would think, because I just think he's so important to how Selles puts his team together. But I do actually think Sam Smith hasn't had quite as much, love, flowers, I don't really know, around this period as I quite expected him to. And James Oliver Pierce spoke about how important it was when he came back to the team. Is there anything you can tell us about Smith, really, in his performance this season?
Well, it's been super important, as you mentioned. He's outscoring his XG this year. He's scored 14 goals from just shy of 12 XG, which is obviously great. One thing I love, which isn't stats based, is he just plays with so much passion and he gets the crowd involved. And when we kind of discussed the questions and this came up, one of the things that first sprung to mind was, quite often when players return to a club, it either doesn't go well, or I don't know, they're so much of a fan favourite that they're kind of look through rose-tinted glasses. And I kind of feel like that's not the case for Sam Smith. Like, I really wanted him to come back, and I know a lot of people did, but he's been really good since he came back. And one thing that stood out to me was how clinical he's been. Like I just spoke about the XG there. But he scored 10 big chances. So that's the stat that we have on Who Scored. It's as simple as it sounds, which sounds pretty good. He's missed 9, which I don't know how you want to take that. That it's okay. But that makes his big chance conversion 52%. And if players to score 10 or more goals this season, that ranks him second, only behind Alfie May.
Oh, wow.
So I think that stat alone sort of shows how important he is to this Reading side. Plus the fact he causes the defenders nightmares. Even when he's not involved in the goals, he's pulling the centre-backs all over the place, pulling them out of position. Yeah, I think he's super important. But also, I looked back at his history. So all of the data that we have of him on Who Scored throughout his career. And he's just a very good League One striker. I think he scored 13 goals at least in all of his seasons in League One.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of using that as a segue to talk about how important he could be next season. We're going on the list that he's going to score 13 goals. Like, that's pretty strong. And I think he could be, if we can keep hold of him, of course, continue to be really important for Selles' side next season.
It's starting. It's been, the last few weeks of looking into him, I've kind of been thinking about whether he's a 20 goal a season striker, with the right service, because he's doing so much with fewer than 30 touches and often just around 20 touches a game right now. But I'm kind of like, is that what he's been told to do, and that's he's expecting to do that, and he's just good at that. Or if we can get his touches up and to 40, and we can get his touches in the box up to 10 to 15 a game, can we get him up to a 20 goal a season striker? And I think it's in him. I think it's interesting what you said about the XG being higher, because he's sometimes you think that it's going to regress to the mean eventually, but I don't know, from that left side of the field, especially, or left side of the box, he's scoring like so many with his left foot. I'm not sure I see that ending. So hopefully a 20 goal season coming up. But in any case, I just wanted to give Smith his flowers.
Yeah,
so,
no, well
he's
deserved.
done that. Yeah, for sure. So, speaking of stats, obviously, you and I'm sure, I mean, I'm pretty evangelical about them at times, and I like to use them alongside the video analysis work. I'm sure you have positive opinions about stats as well in general.
Yeah.
But is there any particular stat out there that you think is misused in football at the moment?
It's a really good question, and you're right. I love stats. it's my job.
Yeah, good. Me too. All right.
That goes without saying. Now, I think one thing, not necessarily misuse, but I dislike when people or certain pages will cherry pick stats to fuel agenda. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not coming for anyone that does do that. I'm sure I've done it to show some bias towards Reading when that's the right time. But I'm particularly talking about when players get put in a head-to-head and people pick on specific stats to compare players by that are heavily favoured to one of the players in the head-to-head. That is one of my biggest pet peeves.
Nice, yeah.
But in terms of misuse, again, actually going back to that last point, another thing I really hate is stats used without context. That is a little bit of misuse. But looking directly at a stat, I wanted to bring up pass accuracy here. Because pass accuracy, I think, is a really useful stat to use in the right context. But it quite often gets used to be applied to creative midfielders. And I'm not sure that's the correct stat, to be used for those guys. Because if you've got players, I'm going to go for Kevin De Bruyne because he's the one that springs to mind, who are picking out passes that 99% of professional footballers can't even dream of. They are not going to be worried if one goes out for a goal kick or if one is misplaced. So that's probably one of the ones that I think quite often gets misused, particularly for players like Kevin De Bruyne, who are pulling off all sorts of passes. But okay, I actually should have looked before this. I think his pass accuracy is relatively low.
I'm just glad that you brought up Kevin De Bruyne because I brought up Foden on the pod the other day, and I always feel a bit weird about bringing up, like Champions League players on the Reading podcast.
For Reading.
Exactly, yeah. I completely agree. The passing accuracy, I think it's great. I do like some of the stats around sort of like once you get into the final third, the passing accuracy there, just because I think that creativity is one important thing outside of the box, but I think that ball retention and just keeping, cycling the ball around is really important as well when you're in the final third. So I guess the reverse of all of this, what stats do you think are underrated? What stats do you really like?
I just wanted to quickly go back to the last question because I've got it up in front of me. So to use a Reading example, Femi Aziz, I just spoke earlier about how creative he is and how important that's been. His passing accuracy is 62%, which is the third lowest in Reading's ranks. So if someone had said, Aziz is 62%, a lot of people will be like, oh, well, he's not had a great season. And I'm like, well, he's created all of these big chances that have gone on to be goals for Reading. I don't think that's the right one for him. But
and I think also, sorry, I just got to jump in there because you're right about Femi. And like, you think, how do you quantify in stats like the amount of times he's attempted a cutback and it's been like blocked out for a corner?
Yeah.
And that's like a chance, it's obviously a corner is not a high probability chance, but it's still like he's come close to getting that ball cut back into the box. And then, he's come close, he's helped Reading to another attacking chance in terms of a corner. So I agree. All right, I'll get out your way. What particular stat do you think is underrated?
Right. This is a horrendous answer to this question, I know. Because it's absolutely not underrated. It's probably, if anything, really overrated. But I love it, and it's XG. It's something that us at Who Scored have launched quite recently, our own model, and I've just spent a lot of the time since we launched it just diving into it because you can spend so long looking at it, what it means, what it doesn't mean. Like it's just so much fun. And the good thing about the Who Scored model is that on the site you can sort and filter, so that makes it even more interesting. Which gives me a chance now to talk about Reading's XG this season. And one thing that's actually super interesting, and I haven't had time to compare it to the other three leagues, but this was the case recently, is that Reading are the closest to their XG of any team in the top four leagues, which, I mean, it doesn't actually really mean that much, but it's quite interesting.
Right.
So they've scored 59 goals. Obviously, they've scored 65, but it doesn't include own goals because there's no XG from them. 59 goals from 58.75 XG in League One. So it's an overperformance of 0.25 goals, which...
Right. But after a whole season, that's mad.
It's crazy. I think the closest, I can't remember which team it is, but it's like they've underperformed by -4. So for Reading to be that close, it's like, it's almost quite impressive.
They all season, and I'm not. I think these things kind of go together. I don't know, actually. I'm just going to say there's just balance throughout Reading stats this season. I've seen there's one that we've returned to on the Tilehurst end a lot about sort of playing style and how many passes per action, attacking action and stuff like that in a sequence. Passes per sequence, I think that's the one. And Reading are just slap bang in the middle of that too. We spoke to James about a month back now, and we were saying, his work that he's done on the in possession side is impressive. He's created some fairly attractive football, certainly versus Paul Ince and versus some previous Reading managers as well. But in general, because they can also do the Selles pressing thing, they just seem to be able to do a little bit of everything, right? They can do the counter attacking, they can do the pressing and going at you right away, or they can do the sort of slow build up from the back with Tyler Bindon putting his studs on the ball. In general, I think you're right there. It's interesting to hear that they are right on their XG because they are balanced in general as a team. Speaking of that pressing that Reading engage in, what stats on who scored that we have available can help us the most kind of was seeing Reading's press?
Well, it's not so much a stat, but it is a feature of who scored, is that we have heat maps.
Yes.
And I think they're really interesting for Reading because...
I was just going to say there before you said they're excellent. And if there's anything that you guys take away from this to use on who scored, I mean, I love all of your stuff and your ratings, but the heat maps are particularly excellent.
Yeah, and they're so interesting for Reading. If you look at Harvey Nibbs' heat map, and you didn't know who he was or where he played, you probably wouldn't be able to tell me which position he was playing in. He's just all over the place. But I think the best stat for kind of amplifying Selles' pressing style is they're Reading atop for tackles in the league with an average of 18.2 per game. Nibbs is the biggest contributor of that. That's not a surprise based on his heat map when he's getting everywhere, getting stuck in. So I think that's a big thing. We don't have stats for this, but just from the eye test, a lot of these tackles are in the opposition half. So it's from the forwards and from pushing up high, which then has resulted multiple times this season in Reading creating a chance or even scoring a goal from that high press. Another point I just wanted to make is that the tackles and the pressing, I think, makes this team so likable. So one of the things I was thinking about before this podcast is I really love this Reading team, as in this crop of players.
Yeah.
And I think for a while now, a lot of Reading teams, there could be question marks about how much they give for the team, especially when times are tough. But I don't think those question marks can exist with this current side. Everyone giving their all. It's just plain to see. And I think it really does make this team so likable. And that is probably credit to Selles.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, no. And that is a huge part of why you want to show up on the weekend as well. You can, I mean, let's say the Die Young experiment went well. I know sacrilege Reading fans, I'm sorry, but let's say it went well and we put together a team of Shania Lucas and different championship journeymen, but it actually came together, went well for whatever reason. I'm not sure. I mean, it's a silly thing to say maybe, because, you know, if we were playing well in the championship, I'm sure we'd be happy. But I don't think we'd be as happy as Reading fans, knowing, you know, like our history with how we've developed teams, with putting together a team like that. I think that sort of developing one from youth, as Bowen and Sellers have been able to do this season, I think that's a much more Reading Football Club way to build a team.
I agree, and even in the way that they react in defeat, like the person that springs to mind is Tom Ince last season. Like the tantrums he used to throw, constant bickering with teammates when times were not great. But you see the complete opposite this time. The team are putting an arm around each other. They're picking themselves up and they're going at it again. And we talked about how things have improved since November, and I think that's a big part of it, is because the team are united as one, and they are putting their arm around each other, and they're going to war together, which I think probably is the first time I've been able to say that about a Reading side in a little while.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. I get to go to not too many Reading games, obviously, because I'm over here in America. But I've been to I went to Peterborough at home and Exeter at home this year, and a really notable shift, obviously, between those two games. And I remember in the first game when we conceded against Peterborough, Andy Carroll had a 1 minute, maybe 60-second go at Nesta Guinness Walker right after that. Whereas when we saw the Exeter game a few months later, I noticed Vickers, I think, started that game, and he was having a bit of a tough time in the opening 10-15 minutes, and Nibs was going over and sort of like encouraging him and saying, like, this is where I need you to be. Like, he was trying to explain to him his role on the field. It just immediately shows you that, you know, the character of the guys that we've been able to bring in, which I just think is crucial. So yeah, really interesting. All right. One of the most interesting sets of statistics on Who Scored, and I'm not sure if people know that you guys have this. I'm not sure I knew you had this until last week, actually. This is fascinating. Who Scored has refereeing statistics, which is kind of interesting. Now, I'm going to let you talk, you know, just kind of generally about this, because I don't want to throw anyone in particular under the bus. That said, Charles Breakspear appears to have been the biggest thorn in Reading's side this season. He's given a red card and a penalty against. So this is just kind of the information that you can glean from this, guys. But are there any referees that you can remember really having it in for Reading off the basis of these statistics?
It's really hard, right? Because if you go to games or watch games, you kind of feel like every referee has it in for Reading. Right. And I think that's just the life of an EFL fan, is that you're constantly feeling like you're hard done by. But no, not really, to be honest. And it feels like we've kind of got what we've deserved from referees this season. Albeit, like, the fact we've only had 2 penalties feels light, but there are, I can't remember which team it is, but there is one team that's received fewer than that. Mm-hmm. But on the flip side, we've benefited from the most own goals. So I kind of was putting them in the same category of, you know, hard done by ship and lucky. Right. But also, like, we, as a result of the press, of Sellers' press, we have been quite aggressive this season. Yeah. We're averaging the third most fouls of 12.2 per game. So yeah, only 2 teams committing more fouls per game. So I think the disciplinary record is probably just about right for how aggressive we've been throughout this season. Yeah. And one thing, like, I would just say on the same topic is, I would probably take any refereeing error from anyone in the EFL, providing that we don't have to sacrifice everything for VAR. I just feel so lucky, because obviously I do a lot of work for the Premier League and the Champions League, etc., for Who Scored. I just feel so lucky watching Reading and not having to deal with that madness. So I don't want to badmouth referees too much, because I'm happy with their mistakes as long as we don't go for VAR.
I kind of agree with you. Like this, I don't remember anything. I mean, I'm sure Reading fans can point something out to me, but I don't remember anything really, really glaring. And as you mentioned, it was just surprising to me that Reading only picked up 2 penalties so far this season. Yeah. It happens, doesn't it? Like Bournemouth went over a year without a penalty, I think, and they had a guy, to the point where they had a guy like doing a parody account called like "Have Bournemouth Been Given a Penalty?" and he's only shut the thing down. So it happens, like it's pretty rare to pick up a penalty, I think. So yeah, definitely. All right, Dan, I'm not gonna restrict you any longer. I'm gonna let the chains go. Talk to me about Lewis Wing. He's really excelled all over the park. And I know some of these stats are just mental. So I'm just going to let you please evangelize and tell us why he's the player of the season.
Yeah, I mean, if any of you follow me or have seen my tweets recently, like I'm kind of running out of superlatives for Lewis Wing. And in fact, kind of running out of stats to use that show just how good he is.
Yeah.
But I will attempt to go through a few of them. He's scored 7 goals from outside of the box this season. I'm sure everyone will have seen some of these lovely goals, including 3 in the last 3 games, I believe.
Yeah.
He's scored 10 goals this season, which is his best scoring season. He's had 8 assists, which is his best assists total. But from an XG of just 3.61, which, like, is mental. Like,
yeah,
he should have scored 4 goals, let's say, this season, and he scored 10.
Yeah.
Which, keeping in mind that previously I just said Reading are almost bang on their XG total. Like, he's contributed 10 goals from 3.61.
You better wonder whose slack he's picked up, That's actually we won't go into it, but that is quite interesting.
Somebody's been missing some sitters.
Yeah.
That's for sure. But yeah, he's so good. And another thing that I noticed is just how basically everything goes through him. Yeah. He's had the most touches of any Reading player, which, to be honest, isn't a massive surprise. But generally speaking, when you're looking at touches or amongst the team, it's usually the centre backs that dominate those stats. So the fact that he is top for Reading, I think Binden's up there as well, actually, but not quite at the same level, is really impressive to me. Yeah. So it kind of suggests he's just doing everything and doing everything really well. So yeah, I don't know what more to say. Like I love the guy. I really hope he sees out his contract because he could be so good for Reading. I just do think he is probably better than a League One player, but I'm not saying that he's going to leave. I hope he stays forever.
I'm hoping, I think I said on the pod the other day that I'm hoping that in his head, he's like, you know what, I can basically have the team built around me here at Reading for the next 2 seasons, really. I don't think that, I'm really big on Savage, Elliott and Craig. And I'd love to keep all 3 of those until they develop into some sort of midfield group. But Wing you can't get rid of Wing right now. He's just too good. Fantastic player. All right, well, obviously we're coming to the end of the season now. Reading, as we talked about a little bit, since November, one of the reasonable teams in League One. Getting, I think it's now 8th or something like that since November. So they've fallen off a little bit from being, right up there in like 4th or 6th or whatever it was since then. But in general, they've been, around about or just underneath a playoff team since November. So let's put our minds forward and let's dream and imagine that the takeover is all completed. Obviously, Reading are still under some sort of embargo, but they should be able to bring in, judging by the work we did last summer, I'm expecting Bowen to do some decent work and just solve some of our issues, especially in the winger department. I expect that means that we're going to see Reading as the dominant team in a lot of games next season. And I expect that means we're going to see a lot of low blocks. Now, kind of difficult to talk about, but how do you see the team sort of evolving in a way whereby they can take on low blocks and break them down easily and continue to score goals?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I don't really want to say anything negative about the current side we have. As I mentioned, I really like everyone and I'm a big fan. But I think Bowen does have a job on his hands if that is to be the case, and we are going to come up against low block teams, because this season, as much as we've been okay, as particularly as you said, like since November, It's been all right, and we've shown sort of playoff form-ish. We haven't created that much. Like, I think I've got it written down, actually. Yeah, here we are. Currently ranking 17th for big chances created. So that's quite, well, I mean, it's very low, really, if we're going to have aspirations of playoffs and more next season, which I think we definitely should.
Yeah.
I'm very conscious of Reading have a lot to sort out. Like, that goes without saying, right? There's so much going on off the pitch that needs to be, or it needs to be resolved, but hopefully gets resolved ahead of next season. I think the signs are suggesting that it will do, so that's positive. But I'm really conscious of putting any sort of predictions out there, because I know that a lot of our top players had interest in January that we managed to fend off.
Right.
I would imagine that resurfaces for the likes of Nibs, Aziz, probably Wing, maybe even Binden, Smith. I'm sure they're going to get caught up in the transfer rumours.
Yeah.
If that goes, or if any of them go, really, they'll need replacing, obviously, but there'll be massive blows to Reading.
Yeah.
So I think Bowen has got a big summer on his hands in more ways than one. I'm personally a fan of Mark Bowen. I think the work he does is good in general. So I'm pretty sure he's capable. But yeah, I'm really wary of putting out any predictions before I kind of know the state of play of who's going to be at Reading, who's going to be in charge of Reading, or who's going to own Reading. It's hard right now, but I'm hoping it's going to be positive.
I agree with you on the. So you mentioned like Reading aren't creating loads of chances, and that's kind of like where creating chances without Lewis Wing is kind of like what I see as one of the focuses of the off season recruitment. So this is coming off the cuff again, Dan, so I apologize, but you're putting together these teams of the week. Are there any notable wingers either in League One or League Two who you think could have that special sauce for Reading?
This is a good question. Now, no names really spring to mind, and that's probably because I haven't really looked into it, but there almost definitely will be some. Like there is a lot. There's a lot of talent in League Two. Yeah. And also like at the moment, there's so many players in like PL2. Like we've got a really young squad at the moment, and they've kind of proven, all right, that it's taken a little while for some of them to get up to speed, but they've proven they can be capable. So I wouldn't be too afraid, of looking at, well, even our under 23s in the academy, or looking at some of the PL2 sides for creative players there. Like I know, I don't know if it was the start of this season or the start of last, but we were linked with Omari Hutchinson. I was a massive fan of that deal. I really wanted that to go through, and it didn't. And you see this year how good he's been for Ipswich. Although he's not had like loads and loads of game time, but when he has, he's been so influential for them. And obviously Ipswich have done really well this season, and all credit to them. But like that kind of gem is there to be found. And as I say, I do back Bowen to find it and pick it out. I just hope he can do it this season.
The other end of the table, depth is the main thing that we need, and you need like players who can just show up for 15 games in the season, put together a pretty decent return, and then when another player comes back, maybe they don't start too many games again. But you need lots of little pieces throughout the course of the season, as well as that overarching player. All right. Well, Dan, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time today. Where can people find you online? What are some fun things that are coming up soon?
Twitter is the best place. If you're not already, follow Who Scored. For whoever you support. If you're watching this and you're not a Reading fan, we got you covered too. We literally have everything there. So make sure you're following them. I think they're, apart from the bias that I have, I think they are an essential football page that you need to have if you're into that. But you can find me, Dan Worth, on Twitter. Got two ends in my name because somebody's stolen just plain Dan Worth. But you'll see me tweeting about Lewis Wing for the foreseeable, I'm sure. And if not, I'll see you guys in the party zone on Saturday. I'll be there drinking all of the Ruben Selles beers. So maybe bump into you.
Fantastic. That's awesome to hear. Yeah, definitely going to be a good, I think a good feeling for the end of the season. So that's exciting. Dan, thank you so much. Massively appreciated. And fans, we'll talk to you again soon. Ben and I will be back for the final Off the Weekend podcast of the season. We're looking forward to it. In the meantime, look out for some videos, some threads coming soon on the tactics. We will see you next time. Thank you again to ZCZ Films. Come on, you Royals.